Welcome to Designing Purpose, your guide to finding and pursuing the career you were meant for, with me, life and career coach Brooke Cretz. Want to know the scariest part about leaving your job? The unknowing of what's next. But what if it were possible to leave the job you hate and pursue something that feeds your soul while still meeting your financial goals? On Designing Purpose, I will guide you step by step to leave jobs that no longer serve you and connect to the career and life you were meant for. Join in for powerful stories, examples, and guidance to go from feeling stuck in the unknowing to confidently transitioning to your next career. The Designing Purpose show starts now. So, most of us have gone through challenging times at work throughout our lives. And it's super easy to chalk up not feeling your best at work to a busy period, a stressful deadline, or an unhelpful coworker, right? This week is busy, but next week things will settle down. That's what we tell ourselves. But how do we know when our frustration or unhappiness at work is actually a symptom of our misalignment with what we're meant to do? How can you tell when it's not just a busy or a stressful season, but that your unique talents, passions, interests, and values are just no longer a good fit with what you're doing? This episode will explore the telltale signs of deeper purpose disconnection at work through my personal stories on how I felt, how I coped, and how I imagined when I was in a job that didn't align with the true expression of my whole self, and how you can spot them as well. Over the next 12 episodes, I will be walking you through what I call the purpose journey, which will take you from understanding how and why you may not be in the best place for you through the purpose catalyst phase, what it is that you are actually a perfect fit for based on what you have to offer, and how you can uniquely impact those around you through the purpose connection phase. And lastly, once you figure this out, how you can actively set yourself up for that career or launch that business, which aligns with this unique purpose through the purpose action phase. Beginning today, we will discover how to spot when you're disconnected from your true purpose, common limiting beliefs I hear from coaching clients all the time about why they can't leave their jobs and why those are usually lies, how we can let go of these idealized versions of ourselves, or those versions of ourselves that we think other people expect us to be, which could be keeping us in bad situations. And finally, when it is unequivocally time to leave our jobs and explore what a better expression of our true purpose would be. So let's first begin with, what do we mean when we say purpose? I'll be honest, even as a purpose and career coach, this always felt like a loaded word for me. Growing up, I felt like to have purpose, you needed to do something large scale that would be completely world changing or something so virtuous and sacrificial. But actually, how we'll think about purpose here is much more joyous and authentic. And that is that purpose is the expression of your true full self. That means that through your unique energy signature, so this is your talents, your passions, your values, what motivates you, how you are able to impact the world in the way that only you can. So in this way, purpose is really the vehicle for yourself to shine out into the world. And having said that, realizing you're disconnected from your purpose can be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of reasons. And many have to do with all those uncertainties and unknowns that come along with this realization. Our brains love to jump to the end and have neat, organized answers to questions like, well, if I'm not supposed to be doing this, then what am I supposed to be doing? How would I even make that happen? What steps do I have to take? How would I know who to meet, who to talk to, or who to connect with the roles and business opportunities that I'm meant for? How would I even position myself in the market to show people who I am, what I do, and what I offer them? There's also a lot of fears that come up, and those usually revolve around things like, I'm just not good enough for what I'm doing, and that's why I'm unhappy. I just have to change the way I see things or try harder, and it'll work out. What I want just doesn't exist. That's just the way things are in life. This is what work is. There are people better and more qualified than me at what I want to do. Why would anyone want me? What if I get into another bad or even worse situation by leaving? it's probably safer to stay because at least I know what I'm getting here, even if it's uncomfortable and maybe not the right place for me. And rather than getting caught up and having answers to all of these questions or letting our fears overwhelm us so that we don't even begin and remain frozen, I am going to ask you to only answer one simple question honestly by the end of this episode. All we need to admit today to ourselves is the honest answer to the question, am I disconnected from my purpose? If the answer is no, wonderful. Congratulations on finding a path that feels whole and joyous and that you were just super excited to show up for. If the answer is yes, also wonderful. You've come to an incredibly meaningful realization and you can give yourself permission to not have any of the other answers right now. Not yet. Those will come later, I promise. It's what the rest of my episodes will help you address. Understanding if you're disconnected from your purpose is not always easy or straightforward. There's not usually a light bulb moment or someone coming up to you telling you, this actually isn't what you're meant to do. It's time to move on. This is then how our brains sneakily keep us trapped in situations and jobs that are no longer serving us, as we can find so many justifications for why we should stay in our jobs, how it keeps us secure, and how nothing really majorly bad or terrible is really happening. So why not just maintain the status quo? So what I have found is that the simplest way to really discover if you're living in the truest expression of who you are, your purpose, is to examine how you spend your time and if you predominantly find yourself either numbing, controlling, or escaping excessively in any form. Through coaching and my own experiences, I have found that the more we participate in these patterns, the more it's a sign that something is misaligned within our truest selves, that we're no longer nourishing who we are and rather finding ways to disconnect, distract, and numb ourselves and attempt to gain small snatches of pleasure or contentment, but ultimately never fulfilling us or leaving us feeling whole. This is because we are usually never feeling fully present in the moment or truly enjoying the journey or the process of what we are doing when we're not feeling free to express our full selves. So, okay, how do I know if what I am experiencing is nourishing or numbing? A lot of this comes down to three things I will outline within concrete examples of my own experience with purpose disconnection. And that really comes down to how we feel, how we cope, and how we imagine. And as I illustrate each of these in detail, examine how they might be showing up in your own life right now. Now I'm going to talk about the first indicator of purpose disconnection. And this comes down to how you feel. Of course, the feelings I will outline are incredibly valid and normal for short periods of time. But when they become chronic or systemic, that's when we know when you might not be in the right place for your talents, passions, and interests to be fully expressed. And to illustrate these points, I'm going to use my previous job as a strategy consultant at a company we will call Strategies, Inc. What's interesting about what I experienced at Strategies, Inc. is that these emotions and these states of being that I was in really flowed one to the next. And I think illustrating how emotions can begin and what they lead us to if they are not well regulated or well managed, or we're in a space that feels good and whole for us, can really show us how quickly we can decline, essentially. And the very first emotion I remember experiencing on a fairly regular basis was frustration. So when I first started noticing frustration in myself, it was about 8 months into the role. And I just started feeling that kind of tension and unease. And of course, when we're new in jobs, we want to be the one to get out there, be a go-getter, accept things, understand that, of course, we're not going to agree with every decision. And I was doing that. I was understanding. I wasn't the leader. I wasn't the boss. There were just things that were not going to feel right for me. But I started to realize that no matter how many conversations we would have about working in a more balanced way, prioritizing people over results, or really putting ourselves first over the clients, it just seemed that the ways that we were working were so incongruent and unsupportive of us to be our full selves at work in a really balanced way. You can guess, now that I'm a coach, something that's incredibly important to my core is being able to support people and meet them where they're at. Not just tell them that they need to be better, that they need to do better, that their best is not enough. Let's keep pushing ourselves further and further, to take into account what's happening in their personal lives, to be that person to understand how others work best and not just keep them churning along in a system that kept demanding more and more and more of them. And because I felt like people were fearful of being able to raise the issues and find meaningful solutions, that underlying fear and tension just led to taking on more work, saying yes to more things, and feeling a greater responsibility as a team to achieve and deliver. So I think that the more that we continued going down the path, the more I became frustrated that we weren't really honoring who we were and what we had to offer within our team. So as you might be able to guess, what this really led me to feel next was very, very tired and burned out. Feeling motivated by fear and that need to do more and be better felt like this constant undercurrent. It drove me to just feel chronically exhausted. And I think that in the 3 years that I was there, I burned out significantly at least 4 different times that I can remember. I was falling sick, my body would ache and feel sore. There were just certain things that were happening so somatically within my body because I felt like there wasn't really a choice to, again, honor the people, honor the team, honor where we were, and just churn things out, be there for the client, do. Nothing that we do is good enough, just keep going, just keep doing. And because that took precedence over so many things, people just continued pushing themselves past 97%, past 98% to do better. And that just felt so misaligned with who I was at my core and what I believed in for other people as well. Over time, that feeling of just constantly feeling tired, constantly feeling like, I was reaching the point of burnout, was you get to that place of apathy and dread. So you start to get to a point where the constant pressure to do more, to be better, really results in, well, what's even the point, right? I've tried to speak up, or people might say things are going to change, and you start to feel very disconnected from what you're doing, what the greater purpose is, and even wanting to show up for work. So I was honestly in a place where I was constantly counting down the hours or the days when I could just get to the weekend, when I could just not have to work anymore. And after about a period of a year to a year and a half, I started having chronic insomnia that I had never encountered in my life, especially dreading Sunday night and having to go into work to, again, just deliver, produce, prove myself, and leave no room for error. And it just started to feel less and less like I was being honored for who I was, or the people around me were as well. This all culminated in what was by far the most difficult emotional state for me, and what I really found myself in deeply in those last months before making a change and feeling more aligned in my purpose. And that was a deep feeling of isolation, disconnection, and feeling different. So when you are in that place of not feeling your best, of knowing that this is not for you, I think a lot of us want that feeling of validation or of inclusion, that other people see what we're going through, that they're experiencing themselves, and that we're all in this together. And what can sometimes happen in these experiences is that people might not see any problems with it. It might be how they work best, or there is certain things keeping them from expressing the fact that they don't feel at their best, whether that's feeling that they might be inadequate or unworthy or somehow not good enough if they brought up that they were also experiencing problems or this job did not feel like a good fit for them. And I think for those of us who do come to that realization, it can feel extraordinarily isolating, extraordinarily lonely, because you start to think that it has something to do with your own merit, with your own worthiness of, wow, other people are okay and I'm not. That must mean that there is some sort of disconnect where they are above me and I just need to catch up to where they are. And I really feel that because of who I am, because of how people-centered I am, because of how much I thrive in social settings and being there with other people, that feeling of isolation, of feeling just on my own, that we didn't have opportunities to connect, that we didn't have space to collaborate, was by far the most challenging. And what it came down to was that I really had no idea who I was after experiencing these emotions for such a long period of time. And I lost my sense of self. I lost that sense of curiosity, of playfulness, of joy. That was such a huge part of my being, huge, how I enjoyed relating to people. And instead, it all became about just proving how organized I could be, how on top of things I could be, how much I could take on, how much I could do in a project management perspective, or, taking as many meetings as I could, which was just not at all soul fulfilling. I valued so much honoring people and bringing out the best in them. And although people said that was also what they valued, it just diminished our opportunities to really experience that because of the underlying fear and need to, again, take on more and prioritize what we perceive the client needed. Now, I would definitely encourage each and every one of you to think about how you've been feeling in your workplace, how any of these emotions might be coming up for you, and how frequently you might be experiencing them. It's a great first foundation to understand whether or not perhaps this is actually not the place for you any longer. The next telltale sign of purpose disconnection is found in the ways in which we cope. Now, again, coping mechanisms can be extremely healthy and balanced in how we manage our emotional state of being. And I'm not out here telling anyone that things that like eating ice cream or watching Netflix are bad for you when they're in healthy moderation. I think the key with these coping mechanisms is to identify if they are becoming so excessive that you are unable to really feel present, content, or satisfied without immediately going to a coping mechanism. So coping really comes down to trying to control something. We are trying to control and regulate how we feel about situations, or even control the situation itself, to avoid feeling these negative or uncomfortable emotions. And although coping mechanisms take many forms and are different for everyone, I have noticed both in myself and in those I have coached that they typically take on two different orientations. And those orientations are distracting or anxious. Distracting coping mechanisms are some of those that we typically associate with the typical mindless vices that we might engage with casually, or in some cases grip onto excessively. And again, these can be extraordinarily healthy when they are balanced. But if they are imbalanced, they typically take the form of what we would consider typical addictive behavior. So that's excessive food or drinking, phone usage, and social media scrolling, mindless streaming, shopping, and just general loss of interest in other things, a general loss of wanting to engage with the outside world for long periods of time. And that is when I think we really try to find some modicum of control over our time, over our feelings, over how we experience and engage with life. And when we don't feel like we have control, and the power to be and express our fullest selves, such as when we're in the workplace, which is where we're spending a lot of our time and a lot of our energy, we will grab on to any other way to try to satisfy that need to be well and whole. These played a big, big role in how I coped during my purpose disconnection. This is vulnerable for me to discuss, but I honestly developed a large dependence watching Netflix on my phone and continued to gravitate towards these weird, dark, twisted psychological thrillers and murder mysteries. And this is not one of those things where I would watch here and there. I would watch these on end, getting up 2 hours before work, watching them 3 or 4 hours after work, maybe watching 3 to 5 of the films in an entire day, just going on a loop, watching more and more as a way to try to grab on to some sort of control over my feelings and emotions while I wasn't at work, which was a place where I was not feeling my best. Another thing that I want to express that's also very vulnerable for me and that I have a lot of compassion as I'm sharing it is that there was a point in time when my alcohol consumption increased exponentially. I would begin having a drink every night while making dinner, which turned into 2 drinks every night, which turned into 3 drinks of hard alcohol every night. It got to the point where I was so desperate to feel something that wasn't the negative feelings that I was experiencing at work that I would start wondering if it was possible to have a drink around 4 p.m. before the workday ended. So as you're thinking about yourself and some of these behaviors, think about how frequently they might be coming up for you and how much they might be your need to control how you're feeling or control your situation. This other coping mechanism that I talked about is more of an anxious behavior or compulsion. And these fall into more of the pleasing and proving varieties of control. So this might look like trying to overly please your boss, coworkers, or clients. Taking control by obsessing over inconsequential things you don't actually need to do, like formatting or designing or organizing, but you just continue doing as a way to try to fill that need or that void to prove yourself in the workplace. Email checking, formatting, doing unnecessary things just for the sake of them. That all falls into the anxious coping mechanisms. So for me, this looked like obsessively working to format a report I had already spent months on in the middle of the night at 1 a.m. while pregnant to show people how well I could do things. Again, no one was asking me to do this. I just began creating unnecessary things like standard operating procedures and processes and systems that my boss probably never read or cared about, but I was just so desperate to, again, prove myself that I belonged there, that I could get on board, that I could make all of this work. And logically, I knew that they weren't necessary, but they really helped me feel in control and safe. And I think that that was a huge motivator for me to avoid that fear and unpleasant emotions that I was not in the right place for me. Finally, we can discover if we were disconnected from our purpose based on how we imagine. So all of us have fantasies and daydreams, which in moderation are very healthy and soul-fulfilling. Imagination is a beautiful and incredibly useful part of life that can improve the ways in which we think and interact with the world around us. But what about when these fantasies or daydreams become excessive or constant and you find yourself always retreating to that inner world, imagining or constructing an alternate reality that you go to whenever you can? At this time, it might be a good idea to reflect on how often are you trying to escape to another time or place? How often are you living in your head to avoid what is happening in your present reality? If you find yourself in this state for long periods of time throughout the day, it's interesting to examine this escapism from the current moment and ask yourself, what details are you noticing about your fantasies? How do you feel and how are you seen by others in these fantasies? How might it not reflect how you feel or perceive that others see you now? This will help you to better understand what you may actually be interested in as ingredients to your own purpose fulfillment. This is not to say that if you pursue being rich and famous with a big house and lots of cars, that you will automatically go and find happiness. But look at what those ingredients might be telling you. So maybe imagining being famous is actually telling you that you're searching for more community and friends to feel seen and part of something, particularly at work. Maybe having the big house and cars is more about opportunities and adventures you could be incorporating into your life when your work might feel kind of slow and stagnant and you don't have a lot of excitement. For me personally, my fantasies were always of a slower, more stable life that did not revolve around work. I dreamed of having strong relationships with my kids, this flexible career, and a stable house to exist in. I had a strong community and engaged with people on deep, meaningful levels. And all of this really helped me to realize that I was utterly disconnected from my purpose. And I really craved deeper, more individual connections with people to help them be at their best and use their talent, skills, and passions to embody their fullest purpose. Coming to this conclusion that I was no longer a fit for what I was doing was really hard. In a lot of ways, I felt like I was just not good enough to continue before realizing that it was just simply not a fit for who I was or what I was meant to do. So what I want to ask you now is for us to go back to the first question of the episode. Are you disconnected from your purpose? All that is required from you today is for you to personally admit to yourself if yes, you feel heavily aligned with what you're meant to do, or no, there are certain aspects of your job that may have at one point served you, but don't really allow you to feel like and engage with your full expression of self or what you came here to do. In the coming episodes, we'll talk so much more about this, including limiting beliefs that keep us at our jobs we hate, how to let go of those idealized versions of ourselves keeping us stuck, unequivocally understanding when it's time to leave our jobs, how we can actually connect with our purpose and understand what we're meant to do, and so much more. I'm so excited to be with you on this journey. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. You have been listening to Designing Purpose, your guide to finding and pursuing the career you were meant for. If you are curious to navigate the unknowns keeping you stuck in your job and confidently discover and pursue the career you were meant for, tune in every second and fourth Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on transformationtalkradio.com, where I give straightforward and practical guidance to facilitate your next career move. For more information, visit www.thepurposefulpractice.com.